Jagriti Agarwal?
Here.
Is there a proxy for that?
Yeah, proxy. Austin Toddy.
Yeah. Dr. Bonnie Chalette? Here. Dr. Clint Coleman? Here. Ms. Charlotte Delatorre? Here. Mr. Adam Deveney? Here. Ms. Heather Howe? Here. Mr. Clint Coleman? Ms. Janie Nixon? Here. Dr. Sabale? Is there a proxy for Dr. Sabale? Mr. Nicholas Stewart?
Here.
Ms. Ashley Johnson? Is there stuff? Mr. Kevin Vincent.
Okay, is that better? Oh, yeah, that is better. All right, thank you. Sorry. All right, so let me say that again then. The first item on the agenda is approval of the minutes for the meeting held on April 24, 2024. Are there any comments from our members? Or is there any public comments? Do we have any public comment cards? Okay, great. So may I have a motion to approve the minutes? A motion by Dr. Clint. Can I get a second? Second by Mr. Louis Bouillon. Any member opposed to approval of the minutes? Hearing none, the minutes are approved. Thank you so much. So the next item on the agenda is the consideration of proposed artificial intelligence AI guidance for the safe, ethical, and effective use of AIs in schools. Are there any questions or comments from our board members? And I say board members, I'm giving you all promotions, task force members. Yes. Sorry, it's old habit. Seeing none, are there any public comments on this portion? Okay, hearing none, may I have a motion to open discussion on this item? Okay, motion by Mr. Nicholas Stewing. Can I get a second? Second by Ms. Charlotte Delatorre. Okay, so let's, at this time, I will turn it over to Adam, who will walk us through the guidance document. Adam, thank you.
Good morning, everyone. I'm not sure that my microphone is working, so I may move this one so that you can hear me. So I just want to thank everyone, first of all, for coming out this morning. I know the time change is an early one, but I appreciate everyone being able to make it out today for this meeting. So before we begin, I wanted to just have everyone note that a couple of things. First of all, the format may change of this document. I didn't want that to shock anyone. Once it is finally published, as we work with the graphic design team, they will make it beautiful. So that may change a little bit, but the content will remain the same. Also, I just wanted to note that as we go through the guidance that we can have some discussion. You can make some recommendations as we go through. The guidance, though, is updated. It is revised based on the recommendations from the previous meeting. So we will also, as we work through the document, I'll give a brief overview of those sections, and then we can have any discussion if there is any. Feel free to do that. And then we can we can go through. Now, I do want to also note at different parts, I will tell you that internally, legal, OTS, we will still have them. They are still reviewing certain parts to make sure the language, especially in the legal section, is correct and it's accurate. So if you'll follow with me, I'm going to move on to page 2. You'll see we have our table of contents. It outlines each section. On page 3 is where we'll begin. There is a brief, this is a brief overview of the document. It's the about this resource section. It provides an overview of what this document will include. I do want to point out that we did add the final sentence that the guide aims to equip educators, leaders, and families with a foundation for understanding and harnessing the power of AI to enhance teaching and learning practices in Louisiana. Is there any discussion from any members? I know that you were given this as pre-work, so I know most of you are familiar with it. Any discussion on this section? Okay, let's move on to page 4. So in the overview of this document, this one was revised a bit to capture some of the notes that we had from our previous meeting. So we have the overview of AI. So we kind of shifted this. We have what is AI first now, and then we changed that second section to how does AI impact education. So we retitled those sections, but we wanted to draw your attention to the final sentence under how does AI impact education, which notes that AI is most effective as a supportive tool that empowers educators, not as a replacement for their expertise. So we did have that addition of the sentence there that captures that. Are there any recommendations or notes on that we would like to add? Okay. There are no recommendations. We can move on to page 5. So we did have a restructuring. You'll see that our graphic changed. So the draft that we had did change, but it still captures the elements that were in the original one. So we have this, the integration of AI, this LDOE framework for integrating AI in K-12 education. Looking at so we have this as cyclical. It looks cyclical given the arrows there, but also I want to note that it does allow for interaction and, going back to different stages depending on the need at the time. So we can revisit some of these stages. So we begin with the first stage where we define the purpose and conduct research on AI integration. The second stage focuses on creating and updating clear policies and guidance. The third, engaging stakeholders, very importantly, to ensure that transparency, involvement of parents and guardians, educators, educational leaders, technology leaders, community and industry partners. So you will see that we did add, reflecting the recommendations from the last meeting, we did add those industry partners as they are very important, and that was noted on our recommendations from the previous meeting. And involving all of those people in these conversations regarding this emerging technology being integrated. And then the final stage highlights the importance of ongoing evaluation and monitoring as we integrate this technology, and we assess the impacts of AI technologies in K-12 education. So this final stage really notes that we can come back to those first stages and continue this cycle. Are there any questions or comments about page 5? Okay, we can move on to page 6. So the first note that the first change I do want to note, on this page, on page 6, at the school system level, we have the software approval processes. We did focus on the input of stakeholders. We wanted to emphasize that, but we did want to note that in the fall, we're hopeful that the department, there was a lot of push for this. We focused primarily on cybersecurity, including content and obviously providing a list of systems. So the way we would like to do that is in the fall, we would like to provide a process for evaluating. It would be similar to the tech readiness that we currently have through educational technology. We would like to provide that for any AI-powered technologies. So we want to include that. We just want to note that we put this process here, but there were lots of questions around what will this look like. So I just wanted to give you a little more information that as a department, we are working on creating this to help systems be able to make prudent decisions as we start to integrate AI in K-12 schools. Are there any questions about the software approval processes? Okay, so we will have more guidance coming on that, but we felt that it was a little bit outside of what we could realistically complete in this time frame. The next section that none of the other sections, I'm pointing out the highlights of where the changes were made, revisions. So we also have a revision in the policies and procedures section. We removed the use of the word discipline or anything surrounding disciplinary action. And instead, we included implementation procedures as a replacement for that language because we didn't only want to focus on disciplinary actions relative to that, but we wanted to sort of include all implementation procedures that are a part of that. Are there any questions or comments regarding that revision? Thank you. We can move on to page 7. So the next one is under data storage and usage. I just wanted to note here that we did include Louisiana student privacy law as was recommended at the last meeting. We currently, I do want to note too in this section, we are having legal and OTS reviewing this internally to consult them, especially with the inclusion of, there was a recommendation also for the including of IDEA in there as well. And so we do want them to take a look at that and allow them to help us implement that in the best way. So we did not include that yet, but I did want to note that legal and OTS will be reviewing this more to help us include that. So I did want to note that that recommendation was heard and will be addressed in this change. The next one is under transparency and stakeholder engagement, the last one at the school building level. So we included that schools should engage, the second sentence there, schools should engage stakeholders in discussions and effectively communicate information regarding AI use in the classroom. So in the interest of transparency and disclosing as much information as possible to our external stakeholders and especially families, we included that sentence there to capture that. Are there any questions or comments regarding this section?
Adam, I have a question about the data storage and usage
Sure.
section. Does this belong more with the school system level instead of the school building level?
We could, so we did have a recommendation that that did suggest that, but would you suggest that we include that in that section as well, or should it be moved to there completely?
I would say either move it to school system or include it in both. I think either would cover you there, but it's definitely most of the burden of data storage and usage would be at the school system level, not the school building.
Okay. Anyone else have comment on that?
You may want to have legal also add SIPA, Child Internet
Okay.
Protection Act.
Okay.
While they were reviewing.
Okay, I can make note of that, and so we will move this to the system level. And we will have legal review that to include SIPA as well. Are there any other relevant laws or policies that you all would recommend we add to that, or will that suffice? Okay. Okay, we'll have them look at that, and I will note that change, that recommendation there. So the final, there was nothing at the classroom level changed. There were no revisions or recommendations for revisions at the classroom level. So without discussion on that one, we can move to page 8. So page 8 is technical considerations. We'll start with cybersecurity. I made a note here that we will have, we'll have OTS and legal review for who has access to the data in the systems. That was a recommendation that I do want to bring to the forefront here. So for this one, a change has not been made yet, but after that internal review from those two entities, we would like to include that there, especially capturing who by law should have access to this data and who should not have access to that. So we will capture that in that section. Are there any other additions or recommendations for cybersecurity considerations? Okay, the next one is network and hardware. So this section was complete. This was added. This is new. This was not in our last draft, but based on the recommendations, the overwhelming recommendations for this in this section, we added this. And I think it's very important here. It says AI requires increased computing power and safety support. To mitigate these new security needs, increased Wi-Fi speeds and advanced firewalls are suggested. Are there any other comments or recommendations for that addition? All right. And then I do want to, that was it for technical considerations, unless you all would like to discuss another section there.
Yeah, we have a suggestion for the alignment to educational goals and priorities to include an example of the concept AI should enhance students' learning experiences rather than diminish them.
Okay, so an example of that final sentence there. Okay, I can make note of that, and we can make that addition. Thank you. Any other questions? Okay, we can move on to page 9. Possibly the most daunting section, the relevant laws and policies. Once again, I do want to note that legal will be looking at this or continue reviewing it, I'm sorry. But I did want to bring your attention to the Louisiana Student Transparency and Privacy Laws. So that is right before section 504 at the bottom of page 9. So we did add these laws to this section. The law pertaining to transparency in educational practices, and then focusing on student privacy as well, the student information privacy, et cetera. So does anyone have any notes for this section? Okay.
Adam, on the COPPA, I don't,
Mhm.
I don't really have, I can't come up with specific language that I would prefer, but I don't really like the way that that's worded. And that's certainly something that maybe legal can look at, but I think the way
Sure.
it's worded kind of infers that when you look at COPPA, the onus is, and the legal onus is on the service provider.
Mhm.
There is a portion of that belongs to the school district, but it's really a both that's involved in that. So, but the way it's written there,
Mhm.
I think is kind of misleading.
Okay. Okay. I made note of that, and I know that others did from the department. So we will definitely, as legal looks at that, we'll bring that to their attention as well and reword that to reflect that. Thank you so much.
Adam, I do have one point to discuss. I don't see any of the relevant laws protecting teacher data, and so that should also be a consideration beyond student data. We do have state laws that protect teacher evaluation data and also teacher social security numbers. So,
Okay.
districts need to be aware of that.
Absolutely. I'll write that down as a recommendation for us to note. Thank you, Ms. Howell. And just to be sure I captured that well, so you're recommending that we add a section on the collection and storage of teacher data?
Correct.
Thank you. Any other questions or recommendations for page 9?
Wait to page 10.
Okay, page 10. All right, so I do want to, Ms. Mixon, I know you have a comment for this page, but I do want to draw your attention to the only addition on this page first. We added Bulletin 110, Bulletin 104. These are Bessie bulletins. And then we added the Louisiana K through 12 Educational Technology Standards to this page.
So my comment would be in reference to once the K through 12 Louisiana student standards for computer science have
Mhm.
been completed, that we look at this again and make sure that we have an alignment between those things, or just double check that there are no contradictions and that sort of thing, so that schools and systems have clear guidance about how these things work together.
Absolutely. Thank you. I'll capture that here. Any other notes on page 10? Okay, we can move on to page 11. This section is our training and support section. We did have an addition. If you look at the short paragraph at the beginning of this section above the graphic there, we did add that the professional learning cycle, the high quality professional learning cycle, should include the use of feedback and coaching as a means to build understanding and capacity. Also, we did have a recommendation that will be added, that it should also, this section should also, excuse me, it should also include specific examples of that. So we're willing to add that to that section as well. Are there any other comments on page 11? So are you specifically speaking like in reference to more training on, like, for instance, a basic knowledge of computer science? Is that okay? Okay. Any other comments on that or questions?
Thank you. Mr. Morris asked me to share a couple of notes, and I think this is the best spot to share them. So he's a part of the Southern Region Education Board's AI Commission that has just had its first couple of meetings. This will be an ongoing project for 2 years. And so they'll have a number of recommendations and things that they're putting out and all of that. So one, just the idea that asking the department to stay abreast of that and continue to update this and develop it out as more information becomes available, and as we work with schools and districts to see how implementation impacts what's needed to be in guidance. And then a second part of that was one takeaway from him from their first meeting was the need for some guidance about the appropriate use of AI in a tiered kind of model. And he gave the example of a calculator that when calculators first came out, people were very intimidated by them or afraid of them or didn't want them or thought they would destroy math. And but as it turns out, you really have 3 different kinds of tiers of use here. And one is sometimes you don't have time to sit down and work out 97 times 97. You need to plug it into a calculator and do it right then. And so you should use a calculator in that situation. Sometimes the problem is 9 times 7 and you don't have a calculator with you and you need to just know what 9 times 7 is. And then sometimes there's a situation that may require some discretion about whether it would be best to use a calculator or not. So his recommendation was to, as we work with teachers over the next couple of months and continue to think through this, consider putting in some sort of guidance about how teachers could think about when to use AI and help their students understand when to use AI. For those times when you really should use AI, this is the time to take advantage of it, to become familiar with it, to explore potential uses of it. This is the time when you should not use AI. And then how to navigate those situations when some discretion is required about the whether to use and the degree to which to use AI. I hope I've shared his concerns correctly. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Townsend. Any other comments or recommendations for page 11?
Adam, this is kind of covered in what Mr. Morris's comments were, but I know this section is kind of structured more around the professional cycle, but the one thing that we do omit there is the student side. And I know that's kind of maybe a given, but I want to make sure that that's covered in here, that we are, if we're telling our teachers and the staff and their families and guardians, we need to make sure that the students are getting that same guidance as well.
Absolutely. I'm noting that here. Thank you, Mr. Miller. So adding that student section to this would be important for the training and support as well.
One more thought on professional learning to address the question that you had. I think that as we think about professional learning in K-12, we have some current initiatives to kind of prime the pump, so to speak, in computer science that we're working with our partners at LSU. And we've had some folks, over 1,000 teachers involved in that, the Ignite program. We were waiting for this guidance and this group to formulate that guidance to consider revisions to that professional learning. And so once this is final and complete, we can consider if there should be additions or changes to that professional learning that we're providing. And then, and that way include our teachers within that.
Absolutely. Thank you, Ms. Mixon. So we did have on page 12 We do have with the recommendation by Mr. Miller of adding that student section, we did have some changes to this section, perhaps the most changes in this document. So starting with educational leaders on page 12, we did add to include that educational leaders should be included or should be on a team of experts to inform the integration of AI. And we explained how that is crucial to building and maintaining that shared understanding of AI technologies and their integration in K through 12 schools. And so we even provided in Appendix A, which is on page, which begins on page 17, we did provide sample ILTs for educational technology to assist with that. We noted this, we linked it here or bookmarked it in this section with educational leaders, as they would be the ones who would help lead that instructional leadership team. And so we do have those samples provided here. Are there any other additions that you all would like to, or recommendations that you all have for the educational leader section, or recommendations, or anything in reference to the Appendix A? Okay. If there is no discussion, we can move on to teachers and staff members. And if you do have anything, I know those exemplars are rather robust. So if you continue looking and you do see something, feel free to jump in. So for teachers and staff members, we did add the emphasis of including them on that team of experts as well. And so when I should explain the language here. For team of experts, we're referring to a group of people similar to this one that can inform the integration of AI in education, maybe in more of a local situation, so such as a school system or a school, and just maintaining that professional development and maintaining those professional conversations around the integration and the impact of AI in our classrooms daily. So to keep that, to fit in alignment with our continuous professional learning cycle, we want to ensure that that learning is happening and it's being implemented in our schools. So as far as teachers and staff members, we did add that section to say that we should, it is crucial to include them to maintain that shared understanding of AI and use with students in the classroom. Are there any comments or recommendations for teachers and staff members section? The next section is educational technology staff members. So we did add the final sentence that including technology leaders, educational technology leaders, and a team of experts to inform integration is crucial for ensuring safety and data privacy. Are there any additions or recommendations? The next section is families and guardians. So we did add that it is important to include them in these conversations to maintain transparency and a shared understanding of AI technology. So this came directly from a recommendation at the last meeting that we should be including our community members, our families, and industry experts in conversations together with educational leaders and those who work in education to ensure that the conversation is not only limited to those working in education. Also, you'll see in the next section, community members, we did add industry partners to the description. So including community members and industry partners in this team of experts will be crucial for maintaining transparency, ensuring safety. I would consider adding to that the description of participants there to not only include community members, but also add industry partners as well in that title. Any discussion? Okay, we can move on to page 13. So page 13 is our glossary of terms. So we did feel this was important to include so that we can build a common understanding and common language. These definitions, I do want to note, are not written in a way that, you know, parents and families and other members who are not in technology or educational technology could not understand. So we wanted to make sure that the language was clear and it was not as, you know, it was not very technical, so that even I, a former English teacher, could understand what some of it meant. So are there any questions or recommendations for the first page, page 13 of this glossary of terms?
Yeah, I have a couple of suggestions.
Okay.
Yeah, is this one working now?
It is now,
Yeah,
yes.
I see the light now. Cool, thanks. Under bandwidth, the sentence, many AI programs integrate OpenAI or other large data sets,
Mhm.
which can use up a large portion of available bandwidth and slow down computer performance. The connection here between, or the relationship between OpenAI and large data sets, I think is a little unclear, maybe a little misleading. OpenAI and other companies use large data sets to train large language models, and the large language models themselves are represented by large amounts of data. But a typical usage of these tools in application will not actually involve a lot of transfer of information. So for instance, in the use case of ChatGPT, the exchange of information back and forth over the network is actually a fairly small amount of text. And so I think it's worth noting that in the context of the bandwidth here, some refinement might be useful in that definition.
Okay. Does anyone else have any discussion or comments around that recommendation? Okay. Are there any other recommendations for this page? I can give you a moment to continue looking, if that would be helpful.
Austin, what's your last name? I'm sorry, I was trying to read your.
Toddy.
Hi,
Toddy, T-O-T-T-Y.
Toddy. Thank you.
Okay, we can move on to page 14 if we're ready. So first on this page, I do want to bring your attention to data privacy. We do have an or there. So I would like you to read both definitions there, and please choose one or choose one with recommendations for revision that we could include in this section.
Adam, I would say I like the second one much better. I think that's a better representation of what data privacy is in school system. You might consider protecting student and staff privacy.
Okay. Is there any other discussion around that, or? Okay. If we're in agreement, we'll use that second definition for data privacy. Are there any other recommendations for the other terms listed on page 14? And then finally on page 15, you do have one more definition, one more term and definition. And then finally, were there any further comments on the Appendix A, which provides those sample agendas for educational technology, ILT? So that does conclude the presentation. Guidance document.
All right, thank you. So we had several recommendations throughout that presentation. So may I receive a motion to endorse the guidance with the recommendations received from Mr. Bouillon, Ms. Howe, Mr. Miller, Mr. Toddy, Ms. Mixon, and Ms. Townsend? Okay, got a motion by Dr. Coleman, second by Mr. Bouillon. Anyone opposed with that? Hearing no opposition, the document is received with the recommendations as noted. Okay, so our time together has come to an end, guys. Really appreciate meeting you and having these conversations. Thank you for your time on this task force. So I'll turn it over to Adam now to close us out.
Thank you. Ms. Townsend, could you go to the next slide? I just wanted to provide everyone with the timeline once again. So we are at our third meeting, our final meeting. I want to thank everyone on behalf of the department for being here, the LDOE. So we've endorsed with the recommendations. And so I want to thank you for that, for your input. Everyone who has served on the task force has been very thoughtful in this work. But I did want to make note that we will then bring this document after we make our next revisions to Teacher Leader Summit to receive feedback from the participants, which will be a large amount of participants at Teacher Leader Summit this summer in May. And so at the end of May, we'll do that. And then finally, we hope to have this document officially published by the LDOE for fall for the next academic year, the beginning of the next academic year. And we hope to have those, we'll have those revisions made. It'll be nicely designed by our graphic design team and published. Are there any questions or other comments for me or? Okay, thank you, Mr. George.
All right, this meeting is adjourned. Thank you guys so much. Appreciate it. Well done. Wait a little bit before the next.